Howdy, folks. Lindsay and my wonderful boyfriend Ian here are back again for our special Worlds Recap episode number 7 of Local Lore, a podcast for Lorcana players who believe that the best games are in their own backyard. A quick little preview of this week's episode. We've got a big Worlds recap, trends from the top cuts, and a look ahead into the Disney Lorcana Challenge Season 2 lineup that was announced at Worlds, including a hot stop here in our own backyard. So pretty excited about that. And then, of course, stay tuned at the end. Ian was the winner of our Worlds Pick'em Championship, so he'll be opening a trove here at the end. So we actually haven't opened a trove from this set, so we're pretty excited.
Yeah.
To kick us off, I came up with our icebreaker this time, so I'm going to ask you, Ian, if you could design a promo, so like think set champs, whatever, for your local game store, what character would you pick? What character would you feature? What artwork would you feature?
That's really funny because by the way, we're sick.
Oh, yeah.
So
we had a really good time watching Worlds.
Just hopped up on cold medicine.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we were
COVID,
down for the count.
We had COVID over the weekend.
Yeah,
so we got we spent a lot of time on our couch, and that's why our voices are an octave lower than they normally are.
If
you see any choppy editing, it's probably because we were coughing and we spared you of that. So.
Yeah, big time. It's, ooh, boy.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough one. So, we're hanging in there, but
we are.
We got to stay on top of the news, of the World's news. There was lots of World's news. There was another stream, so
but
anyway.
I do want to answer your question.
Yeah.
So, I thought a lot about, cards that I thought for, set champ promo level cool cards.
And it could be any real character because they always do alt art.
But it has to be of something that's already been made, already a card.
No, I think the world is your oyster. Whatever you want.
Oh wow! Well, if it's something that
Disney relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's okay. Then if it's something that hasn't come out yet, then the easiest probably answer for me would be The Incredibles.
Okay.
It's not in the game yet.
Yeah.
But again, if everything Disney's on the table,
yeah.
I would love to see an Incredibles, promo, playmat, something like that.
Cards in general.
Yeah, and so, but I think you could do something really incredible. Anyways, how about you? What do you think about the what card would you love to see as a set champ promo / playmat?
Well, I have an obvious one, and then I have one that I thought of that I'm surprised you didn't.
Oh, okay.
So the obvious one for me is Mushu. I think that there was a lot of hype around not having a Mushu card, even though we had so many Mulan cards, so I would love to see. I know we're getting a really cool promo at the DLC events from the Mulan card, but anyway, I just thought Mushu playmat would be cool. Somebody in our local league has, I think it's an Etsy one, playmat that's really cool. So, but the one that I'm surprised that you haven't thought of is Alice. So one of your favorite decks is your Alice Growing Girl deck, and we haven't really gotten any Alice artwork, and I feel like she's a very central Disney character, but we haven't gotten a lot of.
I think
even just an Alice in Wonderland theme. So if it's the Cheshire Cat or something like that.
In terms of playmats and promotional stuff, the only thing really was the Tea Alchemist deck box you got from the play kits, one of those sets.
Yep.
I love the Alice Growing Girl Enchanted artwork, and that would make for a heck of a playmat.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah, Alice Growing Girl, one of my favorite cards in the game. You're right. I should have said that one.
Yeah.
Anyways, good icebreaker.
Gotcha.
Good icebreaker. That's why she opened the episode. I'm like, your icebreaker, you open the episode. Yeah.
All right.
Well,
so
cool.
let's move on to our world champ, our world championship recap.
Yeah.
So like we said, we were home feverish from the couch tuning in. It was held at Disney World in Orlando. And it was this past weekend, June 28th through the 29th. So if you're watching this, 5 years from now.
what it was.
You need to know what it was. Our reigning champ, DKP from Germany. Congratulations to him. Great showing. He took down Ed Chu in the finals in the best of 5. It was really cool to watch. It was really exciting to watch. Like we watch a lot of streaming card championships, and I feel like this is the first one I was like really hyped for. I was cheering. It felt like, if I can't have football season, I guess I'll take this.
I know, yeah. It was a cool opportunity to like sit and share that with you.
Yeah.
Just speaking from my personal experience, but also I think it was a good show. I think it was relatively, well paced. I think one of the things that I thought they did an amazing job of, about like the presentation of it all, was that they would bring in during Swiss, if the premiere match you were watching ended quickly, they'd grab somebody,
move them to the table,
or maybe they had a second table. I couldn't quite tell what the setup was, and then show game 3 of that game as well. So just more Lorcana that you got to see, and less dead air and downtime, which is something that you can sometimes run into with streaming tournaments and stuff. It's something that I wish other games would take the effort to like, spend more time watching games and less time, vamping. And not that there wasn't any vamping, but I thought that the casters and the crew and everything did a really good job. I thought that they picked some casters and hosts, with great, amazing personalities, super friendly people that just seemed to relate really well with the players there. Because sometimes, and as a connoisseur of card game tournaments, and somebody who has casted tournaments myself in the past for card games, in Elder Scrolls Legends, actually. It can be hard to get the right personalities that will jive, not just like behind the camera or like casting tournaments, but then also when they're, put in a bubble with other personalities, whether it's a co-caster or co-host, or whether it's a player that maybe is, a little bit more reserved, and they need to kind of pull them out of their shell for interviews. And I know Rebecca Quests did most of the interviews, I think, throughout the weekend.
A lot of the post-game interviews with the players.
And she seemed to have a really nice way with the players and getting them to kind of talk about their games and their decks and stuff. So I thought it was a really well-presented event. I thought the overlay actually was a new overlay that they did during the games.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was definitely... They've definitely improved their streaming production over the tournaments. So I really do think that they brought it out. They put out all the stops. Shout out to DKP, who definitely is definitely familiar with me streaming games. I love that before, at the end of each of his turns, he held his hand out to the camera so you could see it. I was like, oh, he's pandering to the fans. He knows. So he knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, that was something you actually shouted out. That is.
Well, it's because I thought about it. We have in the past recorded, matches of us playing the games, and it's like you get so used to holding your cards close to you that you like forget that there's people watching. They need to see what's in your hands. So anyway, I thought all in all it was a really good. I think they did a good job in casting it. We were able to tune in the whole weekend. We didn't really have any technology issues or anything like that.
No, we didn't.
Yeah. And a lot of those, the on-demand video I think it's on Twitch.
Yeah, and I think you can find it on YouTube too. There's also plenty of content creators that restreamed it, so you can see their takes on it and stuff like that as well. You should be able to find it all pretty easily.
And it's a great tool. If you missed it over the weekend, it's a great tool to go back and watch these, watch these players at the highest level compete and, see their strategies, the decks that they played. I wanted to talk about Super Sealed because that was so cool to watch. What was it, Amethyst and Steel were the at least Amethyst especially.
Amethyst and Steel.
But it was cool to watch some unique interactions, cards from, the sets that won't be rotating. So there was no Friends on the other side. There was none of these cards from sets 1 through 4 that are staples. It was really interesting to watch those matches and the different decks.
Well, and I think too, one of the things that somebody's played a lot of limited formats, so sealed and draft and stuff like that, both in Lorcana and not in Lorcana, there are some potential like downsides to sealed, and I think some of the players even expressed that they were nervous about it or worried about it. They were worried about, hey, maybe their packs weren't so good. I think Ed, who went 3-0 in Super Sealed, even said, I didn't feel like my pool of cards was that great. But one thing I was worried about was that the pool of cards would influence overly much the results. And it did not, to my eye, seem that way.
Yeah.
At least in the games that were streamed, I did see a lot of games where there was a healthy enough, internal metagame to the super sealed format, which I think is a good thing. I think I saw a couple comments like, "Oh, everybody's playing Amethyst and Steel," and I'm like, that means that the players are taking it seriously, and that means that the format has some sort of link in terms of what is good or not good,
right.
And that means that the players can chew on that and fall back on it when maybe their card pool is not quite as strong. I also thought that it seemed like there was just enough card draw to stop games from stalling out at turn 5 or 6, which in Lorcana, we've played in enough sealed events where sometimes you just you get to turn 5 and 6 and you're like, I'm top decking for the rest of the game now. And it seemed like there was enough card draw and resource extension of some form that was getting mitigated. And then while Amethyst and Steel were represented heavily, what was fascinating was that I think almost every color, I think Sapphire was the only one that wasn't represented. Yeah. Every other color did make its way into those shells, and Zach Bivens had Amber and some of those powerful Amber cards.
Someone had Amethyst, Emerald, and Ruby.
Yes, 2 people did, I think.
Yeah, because I know somebody had a Maui Shark. We saw at least one Maui Shark.
Yeah, there was a Maui Shark, yeah. And I mean, the metagame was what we kind of previewed, which is evasives, things that answer evasives, big stats.
Yeah.
And card draw.
Big meat sticks.
Big meat sticks, as I like to say.
We saw a bunch of overstated meat sticks.
Overstated meat sticks.
Ataya. She was a champ when we did our sealed event, so definitely some overstated meat sticks.
Yeah, that's right.
Hanging out.
That's right.
Never underestimate.
That's right. It was a lot of fun.
It was.
I did enjoy seeing it. I did, and I felt like it was that nice little blend of having to use what you get, but with enough that it seemed like players could, the better players could shine through with that. So that was pretty cool.
And then the tri deck, it was interesting. I want to get your thoughts on sort of the spread of different types of decks that we saw, the different ink combinations. Ed showed up with the meta relevant, like we talked about, the red, blue.
YouTube ordained best 3 decks. Yeah,
exactly. But then we also, obviously DKP won with red, blue. What was it? Amethyst, Steel, and he had Trinidogs too.
No, it was Amber, Hyper Aggro. Kurt Spice had Trinidogs.
That's it.
If I remember correctly.
So it was an interesting mix of decks. We also saw some cool stuff. So Zach Bivens, his Ruby, Amber, Hyper Aggro crazy deck that we only got to see played once.
Yeah, just once.
But yeah, I'm curious your take on the decks that showed up, and we saw a lot of Amber Steel getting banned or getting benched.
Benched, right? They're not banned.
Not
it's
banned,
benched.
just benched.
I was pleasantly surprised at the diversity. Actually, no. You know what?
I was only disappointed that we only saw one Blurple deck, but we did get to see it streamed, which was cool.
So I said pleasantly surprised, and you know what? If I would been asked to bet which is more likely, that everybody or that the majority shows up with Ed's lineup, or if the majority showed up with different things, I would have bet that the majority would have shown up with different things. And so I feel affirmed in that I thought that the format had enough flexibility when we previewed like our not like we didn't have deck lists associated, but our conceptual deck lineups. Not only were some of our ideas incorporated, like my idea of taking Ruby and putting it in an aggro shell with LeFou's, literally was in Zach's lineup, right? And your entire lineup made top 8. So like literally, like that was played by Lucas, right? Who had the Blurple, and so I was really encouraged to see that, like we had enough, there was enough strategy involved in what you ban, what you don't ban, what you let through, and how you want to try to tackle certain matchups. And like each deck that doesn't get banned, each deck that you have to play in the best of 3, it only has to win one of the matchups, and so you can kind of like leverage which one you think is going to go with which of your opponents they're going to lead with, and we could see that dynamic in a few different places.
Yeah, it was really interesting for me to see kind of all of the micro decisions that these players had to make. So like not only do you have to make all these decisions while you're playing, but you have to make all these decisions about which deck you're playing against, and it was kind of interesting to watch that dynamic between like what the decisions about which decks to bench. It was clear that some people's strategy was, like you said, you knew that they were always benching a certain color combination or a certain, and that some had more of like an aggro or more like there was a lot of tempo kind of mid-range decks, obviously, to kind of to adapt to the play field. I also think the interesting part was I feel like we saw a lot of tech cards. And so like, because they had these open deck lists, I think that people sort of knew, they started to throw in a few more, I previewed the lists a little bit, and there are a couple more silver bullets in there over.
The Cusco's and Blurple is a perfect example of this, where it's like, what if I run into McDuck Manors or Lucky Dimes?
Yeah.
I want to make sure as Blurple, even though it's not really a core part of my game plan, that I have, a way to remove those. And it actually was useful in that matchup.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you're right. I think that is a function of the open deck list format, in that, putting in more 1 and 2 of, we talked about this last episode, putting in more 1s and 2 ofs forces your opponent to play around more. I know the casters at one point talked about Ed, playing a max consistency red-blue build with not a lot of random cards in them.
Yeah.
I think that no one can besmirch Ed's, skill and preparation or anything like that. But I think that ultimately, you can see the rest of the field, for the most part, outside of aggro decks, the mid-range and control decks, you saw that same philosophy taking place, where people were adding in a few extra cards, especially in spots where like it didn't disrupt consistency, in order to make sure that the opponent had to worry about more things. And so, I think that was that played out. One thing that was really cool to me was some of the lists, and how, like, I don't think anybody took an approach that I said I would try, which is a single game speed lineup, where they went, all in on playing control or all in on playing aggro or mid range, right? But one thing that I did notice is that, a lot of the top players seem to have an aggro speed option.
Yes.
Like, which surprised me. I think incorrectly, and I think this is not something I say of the top players, but I think incorrectly, there's a lot of people in the middle tier of players or in the upper middle tier of players in terms of skill. And a lot of this is something that comes from other games. It's baggage that is brought into Lorcana. But I think there's a lot of people that look down on aggro, and they view it as low skill. They view it as, if I'm a top player, why would I ever play aggro, right? And I think that can be pretty foolish, because I think that there's a time and a place for every deck.
Oh, yeah.
And it's more, I mean, I come at it from the perspective of if I think I have a better chance to win with aggro than I do with something else,
Yeah.
I care more about winning than I care about my silly little, image as a player. And I think that panned out and played out where like the top players recognizing the power of having an aggressive deck that can go under the red-blue, the ruby amethyst, and as we came to learn, the Emerald Sapphire item box.
I was going to ask about rogue decks we expect to see it.
We'll get there.
See in metas now.
And so I think it was really cool to see all of this aggros. Now again, I think we can all agree that aggro does not require as much skill as a high action count control deck, purely because you don't have to play the game as long. But the decisions that you do make are just as important.
Right.
And figuring out, especially mulligans, are really challenging in aggro. Figuring out which of the cards to ink and which to play, when to exert something to quest. There are occasionally times where we saw like players who were the aggressive player did stop to remove a key threat on the opponent's side with a challenge, and knowing when to do that and when not to do that. I think there are a lot of newer players that come into the game and they're handed an aggro deck because it's very easy to say, play the thing, turn it to the right, collect lore, and see what happens.
It's the skill. The skill expression is learning when not to turn it to the right.
When not to turn it to the right. Yeah.
I feel like Dogs is a great example of an aggro deck that you're not really you should wait to quest.
We literally played like 7 or 8 games with Dogs earlier in the week, and really kind of were exploring when is the right time to quest, when is the time to sit on it, and there's a lot of nuance there that yes, newer players can come in and get some quick wins or at least be close in some games because they can sort of take these easy to execute strategies, but just because it has a low floor doesn't mean it has a low ceiling.
Correct. Yeah.
In terms of skill expression, it was really cool to see that, and the deck building decisions they made with these aggro decks, because Worlds was won with an Emerald, Amber, non-Dogs hyper aggro deck.
Exactly.
That is a Worlds winning deck list.
It sure
now, thanks to DKP.
Yeah.
And between that and Zach Bivens, Ruby Amber, but we saw other versions of someone else in top 8 also had a Ruby Amber aggro deck, and so we saw a few different ways that it can be played, and I just think it's really cool. I think that there should be a little bit more respect for these aggro decks and the different ways that you can build them, which I think everybody had kind of pinned aggro into a corner on one or two strategies. So now it was
cool to see a couple things.
Yeah. Now the flip side of that, before we get into the decks, and I think that this is a segue for me. The flip side of that is some decks in here, I think some of these aggros included, were there because of the ability to bench dangerous decks like Amber Steel or like Ruby Sapphire or whatever. That the ability to bench something that you knew was going to give you a hard time opened up some deck building freedom. And I think one of the biggest benefiters, one of the biggest, the people that benefited the most from it was the Emerald Sapphire item deck.
Yes.
I think we saw 2 players using it. Luca had it? Yeah.
Yeah, Luca did.
I think Luca had it.
I think it's Luca. I can dig.
Thank you. And Zach had this Emerald Sapphire items deck, which, boy howdy, was it impressive.
Yeah, it was Luca and Zach.
And I don't know, perhaps some of the other players that didn't make top 8 also had it. This definitely seemed to be this had been sort of floating around in the background for a while, these Emerald Sapphire item decks. I don't think that it really made it to the top of the central stage at any events until this point. I think it was a perfect call for a format where you can remove the dangerous fast decks that are going to go under it, because it seemed like once it got set up this item deck had almost no way to be stopped, barring, catastrophic draws. So I think we can move over to the rogue deck conversation. What were your impressions watching this Emerald Sapphire monstrosity?
It was wild because I hadn't seen it before. I've obviously run into, so there were 4 total Emerald Sapphires in the World's Championship. I have the entire deck list pulled up. So 3 of them were the item build with Oswald. 1 of them was a Bend to My Will deck. I don't know if we saw. I don't remember seeing it. So I think I was like floored. I guess I don't know. It surprised me.
Yeah.
To come all the way to the Worlds and have this kind of rogue deck, but obviously, like, the players had tested it. Obviously, it popped up. I mean, it wasn't in a bubble because multiple players were playing it.
Sure.
And so, we've all seen how crazy strong Oswald can be. Arguably how strong Oswald is led to the banning of Fortisphere. I mean, it certainly encouraged the banning of Fortisphere as an item, and just how strong the item builds can be.
Yeah.
It was interesting that no one used Sapphire in the sealed, and I think it's because the Sapphire, a lot of the really strong Sapphire cards, they work if they're constructed together. Like, it is a supporting color
that
has a lot of cohesion within the color, and can be very strong. So it was just interesting to see kind of this, like, I mean, Zach Bivens, his crazy comeback was wild to watch. And it was cool to see some of the other, the hyper aggro decks that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And some of our tried and true favorites too. Like, I mean, I was surprised to not see as much Ruby Amethyst. Lots of Amethyst Steel.
So lots of Amethyst Steel, lots of Amber Steel. Though a lot of those tended to get banned. I think one thing that I noticed, I think the thing about Ruby Amethyst, and we did see Luca play it to really nice success. I believe against Lucas on Blurple, and just drew card after card after card after card after card, and really played that, had the Pan Maui combo, but did not go all in on the evasives. Instead, leaning heavily on the library, the draw 1-drops. To create a massive hand advantage to then leverage, like Ruby Amethyst loves to do.
There are 5 Ruby Amethyst decks. I was curious, so I looked it up.
Well, yeah, but I think only 1 made top 8.
Yeah, I was going to say, I only remember seeing the 1 in top 8.
So, I think that, I think it remains relevant in the metagame as we kind of look forward to, like, what our set champs going to look like. Because set champs, historically, and now the last 1 or 2, we did not have a lot of big tournaments to look at, especially last season. And last season we had no big tournaments to look at.
Yeah.
Other than like no official tournaments to look at.
Yes, that's right.
But in the previously, we saw that the events like the NA championships and EU championships and the DLCs would really heavily influence what was played at set champs, and it makes sense. Players. We just talked a week or two ago about, like, don't be afraid of net decking. There's nothing wrong with net decking. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with seeing what the best players are playing. And
there's a reason it's good.
Right. There's a reason things are good. Now, I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of what decks from this weekend do you expect to see popping up in locals and in set champs, that you wouldn't have seen before this, because I want to throw a wrinkle out there that I think it's important to tell people. Not that I'm gonna, poo-poo any of these amazing decks, but it's in a different format than we're likely to be playing. Right. A lot of these decks, again, like I mentioned, some of them just straight benefited from not having to worry about a specific deck that would be their boogeyman.
Right.
Versus when you go to a set champs and you have to pick one deck and you have to play the field, there's a little bit of the, if you play a deck that has too polarized of matchups, like really good ones here, really bad ones here, you run the risk of having your tournament massively impacted by luck of who you play against.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, I mean, do you expect to see any of these decks, heavily?
I do. I suspect that we will see a lot of people, at least in League, maybe it's at Champs, playing the Emerald Sapphire. I think everyone wants to make that color combination work. And so I think, on Lorcanito, I've been, trying to test out my Blurple deck, and I've run into a lot. It's not the item build, though, as much as I'm seeing just that color combination more prevalent.
Yeah.
I think that we will see a lot more Amethyst Steel. I was really impressed with it. It makes me want to try to play it again.
Yeah.
Like, watching it played just to see kind of how it can do. I suspect that some tried and true players will bring out Amethyst Steel again.
Yeah.
And I expect, our area, I guess we have our area, a lot of the championship mats in our area have been won with Amber Steel. So I think
true.
Watching, if you watch
Ruby
it,
Amethyst.
And Ruby Amethyst. Just a few.
But you're right. Amber Steel is very popular here.
Yeah. So, decks that I thought would get more airtime that didn't was the Emerald Amethyst that you were raging about. Raving about.
Yeah, it did get banned a few times. We did get to see it completely dominate in game 1 of the grand finals.
For sure.
Ed played it against DKP's Red Blue and got a Diablo shifted really early, and then just drew card after card after card after card after card for the rest of the game. You get to a certain point where you have so many cards, it doesn't matter if you're the aggressor.
You have the answer. You can always find the answer.
You can always put a new threat down. You can always put a new a quester down that forces action from the opponent. And, now I think that's an interesting component, is the idea of having so many cards. If you're the controlling player, it's not always, having more cards is always better than having less cards, but having, way too many cards as a controlling player doesn't mean you'll always have the right answer or have the resources to play the right answer. But when you can get as the aggressive role in a match, when you can get so many cards in your hand that you'll never not be able to play new threats, and you don't have to play super cautiously around specific lines from the opponent, you're in the best position you possibly could be. It was not only is it very strong, it's very flexible, it's very consistent because you pair, unlike Emerald Steel, which I'm sure wasn't played quite as much, but you have additional consistency if you miss the Diablo shifts. You have additional card draw, you have additional tools there, you have ways to interact with other evasives, you've got the Elsas and stuff like that. It's a very flexible deck that it's hard to get blown out playing Emerald Amethyst.
Yeah. We did get to see lots of fun pull the lever, wrong lever interactions.
Get to see some of those.
So
that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Amethyst Steel, I think, is a deck that we have in our set champs journeys not been super pleased with.
Yeah.
Personally,
as we have said, it's just too fair.
We've said that in the past. That is true.
But maybe it's got a couple of things up its. There was a lot of. I think the thing that we saw was leaning into ways to cheat out lore. With the white roses, with the goats, with the Cobras. You win by top decking a Cobra.
Yep.
Things like that. I think Calhoun's for sure. I think that maybe we just haven't been experimenting the right ways to play with it.
I think also we can see that the list seemed to get to a certain stage of inevitability where you'd get to like 17. And then it would be like, this is going to be game eventually, just by nature of top decking things that gain lore. I think that because of that, we saw, especially like Zach and DKP's list, just had a ton of draw. everything possible you could play to replace itself was being played. All of the draw one drops, as opposed to in the past we've seen the mine builds where you put the happies in to move to the mine and damage things. And this is just really, tight on how much can you draw?
Right.
Can you draw all the cards? That was the deck. Because you're right. Like, you get to this place where you're playing out the white rose, and then, oh look, I played another white rose, and now I'm playing a cobra and dropping the extra dock, and then playing the dock and refilling the hand. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much pressure. We also didn't see quite so much top end on these decks. So like in the past, we've seen, and I don't have the list in front of me, so in the past we've seen people trying to play things like Gantus and sometimes even the 6-drop Tinkerbell. I actually am not even sure how many Elsas were being played in those lists, if any. I don't.
The Spirit?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing Elsas hit the board from those Amethyst Steel decks. We even saw DKP playing Yensid, and then playing the 1-drop Broom and the 2-drop Broom, and trying to get just that extra bit of cycle with the occasional upside of questing for 3 with that 2-drop. Which, by the way, the Yensid having a 1/3 stat line can actually be really nice if you have to go up against other steel decks.
And again, another way to get some extra lore.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, yeah. So, really cool. I don't know.
Actually, most of these don't have. I'm skipping through some of the Amethyst Steel decks, and most of them don't have Elsa in there.
I think it's
definitely an interesting couple of different builds. So well,
it's much closer to a hyper aggro deck. It's not truly a hyper aggro deck, but it's much closer to that. It's so low to the ground. It's so trying not to. I mean, a lot of them we saw didn't often want to ink past 4.
Yeah.
Like, most of them were like, if I don't have to ink a 5th card or 6th card to make a specific line that I need, I'm not going to. So really cool. I also think that if you watch Zach Bivens, who is objectively one of the best Amethyst Steel players in the game. Right. If you watch him play, you will often look at his hand and see him make lines where he's like, yes, I could slam 3 cards in a row. I could slam a 2-drop and 2 1-drops here and exert a lot of pressure over the board, or show a lot of lore, and then he'll just play a genie. Yeah. And he'll just be like, you know what? Just going to play the genie. And he drip feeds his card draw out on a lot of times. But then he also knows when to just tap it out and play everything down at once. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to learn. I think Amethyst Steel is a deck that I've always told new players, hey, look, if you want to play a deck that makes that lets you play fast, but still has some interaction and forces you to respect what your opponent's doing instead of just going on autopilot and questing everything, I think Amethyst Steel is an awesome deck to learn the game with. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of that as well.
And we'll be is definitely going to be able to handle rotation pretty well. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. Doc's still in the format. Genie's still in the format.
Calhoun's
White Rose, Cobra.
A lot of these, all of the illusion cards are still in the format.
We don't know what, if any, removal will be in the format. These decks tend to run strength, and strength is really good in them. They sometimes run Fire the Cannons. That's rotating, but some of them may get reprinted. Correct. So we don't know. I think you're right. That is another great deck. That's a good deck to invest in for the future. So, yeah.
But we can ramble about decks, lists, and all sorts of things for hours and hours. So, but I do have one more thing. Sorry. Okay. There were 2. I want to shout out the fact that there were 2 different styles of red-blue that made appearances. Right. And we saw both. We saw each one in the grand finals. Both looked dominant throughout at different points throughout the tournament. Ed had the item-focused Sapphire Coil with the big Sisus. DKP had his creation, the DKP list, right? The DKP.
Red,
right?
Blue. With the focusing on Maui Sharks, slamming manners as early as possible, in certain matchups. So you saw both of them
Did he have three manners out at one point in time in one of his
I
game
think
wins?
So, yeah. Or as soon as his second manner died, he put the third one down.
Yeah.
It was pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what I want to say is, obviously, I think a big talking point that the casters covered plenty was just how dangerous Amber Steel was, and how a lot of people were banning Amber Steel. We didn't see a lot of Amber Steel. We did see a lot of Red Blue.
Yeah.
And Red Blue was very, very dominant. I would expect to see, I would always, forever expect to see some of the better players in the game on Red Blue at your locals.
There were
you can just always
20 Red Blue decks out of 28. Out of 28 players, 20 of them showed up with Ruby Sapphire.
And I think that as exciting and sexy as Emerald Sapphire is, I think we can probably safely say Ruby Sapphire is still very dominant. And if you're going and preparing for your set champs, like we will be preparing for the next few weeks, have a plan for Red Blue, both builds, because I think they're both very much alive, as evidenced by this weekend. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, so I am really excited to talk about one of the biggest announcements that came from Worlds, that is certainly what a lot of people are talking about now, is Season 2 of the challenges that are starting. So we have finally had our Worlds event. Now we can look to Season 2. That's going to kick off this fall. And so we've all been anxiously awaiting the news of the DLCs,
Yes.
probably some of us more than others. But we were excited to finally hear about that full scope. Congrats to Ravensburger for getting that list out and getting these events on the calendar.
Yeah,
I know there's probably been a little bit of mixed responses from people. Some people really excited, some people not so much. But I think that all in all, it's great to see. It's great for the health of the game that they're getting these events on the calendar.
Totally.
They are expanding their global reach. So they announced 3 events in North America, 3 events in the EU, 3 events in China, 2 in Japan, 2 in the New Zealand, Australia region, and 3 in South America.
All of them in Brazil, I think.
I believe they're all in Brazil. So yes, obviously we're a little biased, but one of the most exciting places was, and it was funny because we saw a leaked photo like an hour or 2 before they announced it, of Milwaukee, Richmond, and Indianapolis. And we were like, everyone in our little local group chat was like, no way, that's gotta be fake. Like, somebody in Richmond probably threw that in there because, like, what? Little old Richmond? I mean, we're not little, we're big enough city. We've hosted major events, but, and so when they announced it, I mean, from the deathbed that I was on, practically, I jumped up and I was cheering and I was so excited because who would have thought, here in our own backyard, and like our whole region our whole area is really excited. Obviously, we've got 2 other events in Milwaukee and Indianapolis. Definitely, the footprint in North America is a little bit smaller. Last year, we had 6 events across North America, and there was sort of 2 on the East Coast, 1 in Toronto, 1 in Atlanta, a couple in the middle, and a couple on the West Coast. So having those events kind of condensed into the middle of the U.S. Is a little bit of a change. So I think that that's one of the things people have had some, they've raised their hand and had some concerns about, that, people on the West Coast feel like they don't really have as many events to go to. So
it's certainly, I think, something that, like, obviously with it being like Richmond is literally our home city, so that's amazing. And then obviously with us being able to potentially, relatively driving distance to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Milwaukee might be a little bit harder. That one might be a flight, but like, that's reasonable for us. And you have to remember for these things, not everybody is the super pro player or the YouTube content creator that are sitting here like, oh, I'm going to everything, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to try to go to as many of them as possible, right? But the reality is that, like, your average player, wants to play in them, but maybe can only play in one.
Right.
And may, especially in these trying times, in this economy.
in this economy,
you know what I mean? Like, not everybody has the resources to go A, to all of them, B, to go 12 hours
Right.
to one, or to fly,
Yeah.
or whatever. So that is why historically they've been very spread out and try to get one within a 5-6 hour driving
Yeah.
distance of most of the population centers. So it's definitely a little bit of a surprise to me, and you know, maybe a little bit of a bummer for, not for us.
Right.
Like we're ecstatic.
Yeah, we're thrilled,
but I can certainly-
I can empathize with the people. I mean, we
Yeah.
felt the same way. We obviously drove to Atlanta, and we were going to try to drive to Toronto or try to get to Toronto. We'd even considered some of the ones across the country, but it is, you know, and obviously there's a huge scene in Canada, and those. I mean, Milwaukee's close, but it's technically still in the U.S. And you know, there are some limitations and hazards to traveling internationally right now. So it's you know, it is understandable that players are frustrated.
Yeah.
But
and I don't think that is inaccurate. Like, I don't think that's unfair for players to be a little disappointed. Now, we should note, earlier today, at time of recording, they did the Lorecast.
Yeah, so I tuned into the Lorecast earlier today. So they had a little bit of clarity. They did acknowledge that there will be more Lorcana or Ravensburger supported events. So in the calendar year of 2026, so that there's not going to be the list of challenges, as far as Disney Lorcana challenges, that is the final list. And so, or at least for this season too. So they acknowledge that they want the seasons to line up with rotations. And so when there's another rotation in the future, this seasons will kind of line up with it. And so that means there might be more DLCs, like in the calendar year of 2026, there'll be more events, but even in between that, there are going to be more competitive events, that they will, you know, they're going to announce that information when they have it. So they didn't give, it was a lot of soft 25%, like, you know, more is coming, have faith, like hold out, especially events that are going to be farther spread out across North America and Canada on the West Coast. And so, you know, keep that in mind, stay tuned. And it is, you know, it is frustrating. Everyone's feelings are valid. I completely get why they feel the way that they feel. I feel for the West Coast players, for the Canadian players, for Mexican players, like things like about that. But hopefully, you know, it is good for the health of the game, that they are expanding to other regions, and hopefully that it helps to kind of create a more diverse, sustainable competitive scene.
If I can provide some perspective from my experience playing card games my whole life and seeing a lot of these things and how they roll out, I would be. I think this is growing pains. I don't think this is what they envision a perfect final system for the long term of the game to be. And I could be wrong. This is just how I've seen, you know, ultimately Ravensburger does still have a budget.
Yeah.
Right? They have a limited ability. They can't just infinitely host events. These events do not fully pay themselves off historically, even with, you know, the tickets and stuff like that. There's a lot of, you know, event staff they have to hire or hire organizations to put it on. So like ultimately the competitive scene and sales are symbiotic, in that competitive play inspires regular local new players to take the game more seriously and to buy more product and to get involved and to show their friends and all that stuff. But competitive play specifically, the literal tournaments tend to not make a ton of money. Right? And competitive players themselves are not always collectors, so they're not always they're not always whales in the you know, gambling terminology, right? So like there has to be a balance.
Events are expensive to throw on, especially
really
events to this scale.
So typically when you see card games expand regions, it tends to put a strain and a stress on the existing regions until there is some precedent and until there is sort of a playbook from a marketing perspective, which is what our careers are in.
Yeah. So we also understand the back end.
Right.
So we work in marketing, public relations, and event planning. So we get how this stuff goes.
Exactly. And until there's sort of a playbook built where, like, the vendors that you can rely on in those new regions, what kind of the budget looks to place those, what kind of attendance they're likely to get, like, it kind of pulls on some of those resources from other areas. So I think we can expect to see that over time sort of balance itself out, where we may not have 6 DLCs like we did in the first season.
Yeah.
Right? But maybe we get 4 or 5, and maybe they're more spread out in the 2026, 27 Disney Lorcana world season. So, like, I'd say just be patient as best you can. I don't think it's a perfect situation.
Sure, yeah.
But Lorcana has shown that, and Ravensburger has shown that they are going to continue to try to change and improve. And
I think they listen to the people that are playing.
Yeah.
They hear what you all are saying, and they're doing the best they can. I know that they acknowledged the team started small, and the team is still growing, and they're still building, and they're trying to go as fast as they possibly can.
Right.
But they're trying to maintain the health of the game and, build out that community. So it is, be like you said, be patient. The events they did confirm today that the events are going to be the same player cap, but they hope to extend more attendee badges. So for people who can attend.
That one is interesting. That one's a little disappointing for me because it just means it may be a little challenging to get tickets as a competitor.
Yeah.
But, we technically did not have issues. I mean, we've heard that other people had issues.
Yeah, definitely.
We did not have issues getting tickets last season when we wanted to.
We only tried. We did twice.
2 for 2.
We succeeded twice, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, we hope to see, support for these. We hope to see them flourish so that they will be inspired to continue to offer more in the future. And I do think that ultimately, as much as it may be frustrating to, like, see fewer total DLCs in our region, when it is frustrating, I can't deny it.
Yeah.
I think overall it's important for the game to be expanding globally and to establish markets and competitive communities, in Japan, in China, they had a Melbourne regional in Australia, but same difference. It's important to spread those out. I think it's really cool that they're getting them in Brazil now. Brazil, I've personally experienced the passion of Brazilian TCG players, having, them
Played
having a huge support for the Pokemon, trading card game, and I've gone to Pokemon events and played against some amazing, friendly Brazilian players who just were so passionate, and so I think it's really good for them to be getting that support as well.
Maybe we'll have to vacation in Brazil.
Might be cool. Yeah. That's
I think so. Stay tuned. Hunker down. Be patient. Stay tuned. It sounds like there are there will be more opportunities to play the game. They did hint that maybe some of those events will help people get qualified for Worlds. So, nothing is confirmed. Stay tuned. It's going to be more information to come. So, fingers crossed. But while on the controversial topic train, they did make the announcement that they are switching to having best of 3 be standard compared to best of 2, which was the standard format for all of the DLCs this past season. And I think that it is interesting. I personally I preferred the best of 2 format because I liked it from a standpoint that, and I know we're going to talk about obviously the going first advantage of playing the game, and I liked best of 2 for timing. I think games can go on long. Like, we've made strategic deck decisions for set champs based on whether, because our local scene, some stores will do best of 3, best of 2, and it was up to the store. We've made decisions of which decks to take because of that. And so I have always liked the best of 2 format. It felt very fair to me, but I'm not a seasoned trading card player, and as far as like, so this is, well,
getting there.
but in the sense that Lorcana is really the main game that I have spent a lot of time on. So I'm very aware of the going first advantage compared to some of the other things, like getting to know what color combinations your opponents are playing, different things like that. That's obviously come up in, discourse with our local league patrons. So yeah, I am interested to hear your thoughts on the best of 3 versus best of 2 format. So
yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on it, and I don't want to like go overly detailed here. I think I was surprised to see how many people were celebrating the change, because as somebody who has competed at a high level in tons and tons and tons of games, I've played in both formats. I've won tournaments in both formats. And for my store that I run events in, I had settled on the 2-game format for a few reasons. I think the first of which you sort of already mentioned, which is undoubtedly easy, which is timing, and just getting a set champs done across the course of a day, like on a Saturday or Sunday, when you have not only you're tying up a store's real estate, but you're also like trying to make sure that the games end in a timely fashion. You don't have a bunch of people standing around, bored. And I think it just kind of helped from an organizational perspective to get the tournament, rolling and done. It tended also to be a little bit more approachable from the like diverse group of players that we would get at our store specifically. Younger players, shorter attention span, 2 games a little bit better, literally slice an hour off of the time or more off of the time it takes to complete a tournament, or at least to complete Swiss. The other thing is that 3 games can, from a timer perspective, 3 games not just means you're trying to fit a 3rd game into the timer, which I actually think Lorcana is appropriately suited for. I think that in a 55 minute, round, you can totally finish 3 games.
Absolutely, yeah.
Most of the time. Yeah. Barring specific matchups. But unfortunately, it's not just specific matchups. It can also be players. Right. And there is some downside to having a best of 3 format in a community level, where you will have, I have had to diffuse situations at tables as a judge where there is a player who is very experienced and knows what they're doing and is playing fast, and a player who is less experienced and is taking their time, and the experienced players doing what all experienced players do, which is eyeing the clock, and knowing that they don't want this game to end, in a forced draw because they couldn't complete their 3rd game. And there's currently, the game doesn't just reward who has the most lore at the end of it. It's like it'll draw if you don't finish your 3rd game, which then you have to go to the table and be like dealing with an angry competitive player and a overwhelmed, less competitive player who feels like they're being attacked because they're not going fast enough, or you have players who are playing intentionally fast and trying to shark rules, and force their opponents to play fast and then make mistakes and then get call judges on them. So I say all that because those are the downsides of best of 3 from a time perspective. Yeah. And they
especially
have
competitive on a local level.
Well, and they've decreed now that set champs must always be best of 3. Right. That is part of what I was not super happy about. Yeah. At the DLC level, I think there's a different expectation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to give out.
There's a different expectation that players should be skilled enough, should be experienced enough, and at least comfortable enough on their deck to not have to worry about time constraints, play at a good pace of play, and not have to have time impact the results. But then there's the side of it that you also said, which is the play draw discrepancy.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who wants to jump in the comments and tell me that there's not a good enough discrepancy between the play and the draw, you can do it, but I'm going to give you a silly response. Because the reality is that there is a tangible, data-driven impact on, which in past metagames was estimated around 4% win rate. I have my theories that it's higher now.
Yeah.
And if you watch back the tournament from this weekend, the Worlds event, you will see certainly not every game. But
People
a
obviously
majority,
had to win going second on occasion.
a majority of games were being won going first. And players were going into interviews going, I was just really lucky I won the die roll there. I'm pretty sure Zach Bivens was like, okay, well, what was the big, key to your success there? Well, I won the die roll. So that was really lucky. And I got to go first with this deck, and it makes a big difference. Because going first in a game where I play my turn, you play your turn, I play my turn, you play your turn, means that I'm always going to have the first opportunity to establish a threat and play the next highest cost of card, right, over you, barring investing and ramping and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So, being able to dictate the tempo in a game like this, it's different than if you look at other games that have shared turn systems.
Yeah.
So, Star Wars Unlimited has a shared turn system where, you pass back and forth playing actions.
Right.
Versus system that I played growing up had a shared initiative system where, I would build all my stuff, then you build all your stuff. So you get to, so I built my stuff for the round, but before I attack, you get to build your stuff. So you get to see what I did to build and set up your defenses. And then I attack, and then if you have anything, if I finish all my attacks, then you get to make attacks with whatever you have left, and then we clean up, and then it swaps. And so what that does is it actually gives power spikes to one player on certain turns. So okay, I might be a deck that in versus system, and I swear I'm not going to go too detailed on this, but they would have scenarios where yes, a deck might prefer to go second because it has a really powerful 6-drop and it wants to get to attack first on the turn that it plays that 6-drop, but that's deck specific. Versus right now, every deck wants to go first. There is not a single deck in the game that has any reason by design, card selection, archetype strategy that benefits enough from the one card that you get as compensation for not going first. So, I personally take umbrage in that. I do not like a die roll at the beginning of a game giving an advantage to me or my opponent. I don't like playing that way. I like the playing field to be as level as humanly possible and as fair as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Now, there are some advantages to best of 3. If you brick in game 1, you can still win the match.
You can go to game next,
And you can win games 2 and game 3. I think one of the bigger complaints I've heard from people that I think is semi-valid about 2-game format is that it actually can give a slight advantage to a player who is playing a rogue deck or a player that has a massive skill discrepancy.
Yeah,
so
I can see that.
If that player goes first and manages to surprise their more skilled opponent and win a game where both players go in, they don't know what each other are playing, and then they lose that game 1, that player has gotten the 3 victory points no matter what. You cannot win those points back. But in a best of 3 format, you can win. You can take what you learned in game 1 as the more skilled player, change your strategies in games 2 and games 3, and win. Now, and it turns into a zero-sum game where okay, there's a winner and a loser. There's no shared points there. I think that is valid. I understand top players being I want the ability to outplay my opponent even if I go in and lose game 1 blind. My concern comes to, I don't in my experience as somebody who tends to be, I'm a pretty good player. I tend to be the one who's not benefiting from that 2-game format. I've still never had a hard time in events performing in the 2-game format. And I also think that I've seen more games, I have experienced more games that have been, that have gone against me based on the die roll than based on the 2-game format.
Right.
And I think that there's a different type of deck building and a different type of skill that players have that can mitigate going in blind against an opponent and needing to win against a blind opponent. And you play different decks if you're worried about that. If you're worried about people playing rogue decks and you not being able to adapt, you don't play Emerald Steel.
Right.
You know,
play something that's more consistent.
You play something that's more consistent, more flexible.
That you can pilot,
Play an Emerald Amethyst where you can play crabs
anything
and you can
amethyst.
play anything amethyst. Yeah. So like there's wrinkles to this. It's not as simple as best of 3's better. Why were we never playing best of 3? And I get irritated hearing I get irritated watching YouTubers. They're like, "It's amazing, best of 3's here. We're never gonna." I think there's also, and let's be very clear for the new players out there. Don't get brainwashed.
You're allowed to have your own opinions.
You're allowed to have your own opinions on this, right? Because there's pros and cons, and there's also the element of like a lot of existing YouTubers and content creators and pro players, but they come from history in other games. Which have successful best of 3 implementations. Yeah. They're used to it. And there's this weird American psychology, especially, of the, I don't like things to end in ties. But the reality is it's a perfectly fine system. I think best of 2 can be improved upon. I would like to see them. They mentioned they may yet improve on it.
Yeah, they didn't say that the best of 3 was forever. And I'm like, the more we talk about it, I'm like, I don't feel like either of them is a perfect system or a perfect answer.
They're not.
It's hard for me to just say like whether I am team best of 2 or best of 3. I have been best of 2 in the past because I've had good experiences with it. But even listening to you talk about it now, I'm like, well, I could see the argument for best of 3. And so, but I do think that right now, the way that the game is currently set up and the rules of the game as is, like, there's too much of a discrepancy in the winning a game just on the die roll. So obviously people can just say, well, get better so that you can win second. And
well, but I could make the exact same case for 2-game format. If anything, it's more punishing. It demands you to be excellent in a 2-game format. To like win 2-0 demands excellence. And let's not get it twisted. If you go back and you watch some of these top events, the best players are consistently making day 2 in 2-game formats in these DLCs. Yeah. It's not like there's a great leveling of the field. You know, it's not like we're the grading tests on a curve for new players in a 2-game format.
Well, and obviously and we talk about the die roll and that changes up in most tournaments that changes when you cut to top 8, and so
but it's earned.
Right. Well, that's what I was gonna say. It incentivizes players to play out, like, you know, we have people that get frustrated in our region for IDing games, so intentionally, drawing the game to once they've made it to top 8 because they don't really care about their seeding. And so you're like, well, if it is really important, whether or not you go first, it might be important to play those games out.
I have won set championships because I fought for top seeding. And I played my 5th round and I won it and got number 1 seed and got to go first throughout the entire top 8. Like that's how I won my Ursula playmat. Yeah. Is because I fought to get that top seed, and then I just was coasting on easy street. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we tell you all that, so we can tell you this, there's not a perfect answer. Yeah. And anybody who tells you there's a perfect answer is misrepresenting the truth. I do think the bigger problem is not best of 2 versus best of 3, or 2-game versus best of 3. I know, it weirds people out. Yeah. It's actually the play draw discrepancy, because if the play draw discrepancy was solved,
Right.
it wouldn't matter.
Right, exactly.
And actually if the play draw discrepancy was truly even, I would then support best of 3.
Yeah.
Right? But the problem right now is that is not the case.
Yeah.
Now I think that there's some things you can do to like a 2-game format to like, I think that it was really cool to see them use their little symbols to represent what
ink
colors they
color
were playing.
combinations they were playing, and that was just for the people so that they could say which decks they were benching,
taking, yeah.
And they were playing. But I think that would be an interesting way to level the playing field in a best of 2 format.
Yeah. Well, because then the common criticism against 2-game
Yes.
format is that if you're going into the first game is played blind, the second game is played not blind. So how can you kind of even that out so that, you know, in the first game, somebody who's playing a very like specific strategy that needs to mulligan for very specific things, which are skill expressive components, right? You would be doing that blind before. Now you could do it at least with an understanding of what colors they have. It's not fully open deck list, but it is, you know, you're getting to kind of get an idea like, oh, it's green. I probably should mulligan away my friends on the other side because I don't want Ursula to discard
Exactly.
them. So I think there's some things there. Again, we're going to be following the guidance. So for our set champs, we're going to be doing best of 3. I'm not so much, you know, worried about it as I am worried that it is that the problem is not, the true problem isn't being addressed. But we could see, you know, for all we know, the Fabled is going to drop a bunch of cards and remove cards that are problematic around these early turn, you know, early game tempos, the Cindy's, the Diablos, the Popsicle Bells, right? Like they're going to remove some of those so that, you know, the early turns are more of a let's build up and let's see where we get, right? And because once you get into the mid game, if there is not a huge advantage that's been built, then things tend to break down. It just tends to be that games are often decided by turn 5 based on if the person who's going first established, you know, their consistent threats and then run away with it. They snowball the board. So anyways,
so on the same note as the events, be patient. Roll with the punches.
I have to tell myself this sometimes.
This is the message is directly for Ian.
That's right. It's for me.
Think of it this way. At the end of the day, it means more games of Lorcana get played.
And I think that's a genuinely good argument that I have heard people make. They're like,
I like
we get
to play more games
because we play more Lorcana. And I'm like, that's a fine reason. That
would be Ian's reason. So.
That's a valid reason, yeah.
But we've talked about a bunch of things, but we have a very exciting next piece of the podcast. I think it's time for you to open a trove.
Yes. Let's do it.
All right. Tell me something good.
All right. Woo! Oh my goodness. Thank you, Edmund Chu.
And Mo.
And Mo with the 7th place.
I mean, I was
finish.
hoping Zach was going to help me pull out a win, but it was
actually really fun to watch.
It was pretty close. Yeah, we were cheering for different people, so we were cheering for everyone.
And they made, and like, you know, 3 of the 4 people that we picked made the top cut.
8, so.
And, you know, we did also get to see Zan play
was
Super
first.
Sealed early.
Yeah, I think he was on the first stream. So
we actually have not opened one of these.
We haven't from this
yet,
set.
From this set. So
I think we've gotten about one from each set. So I love the red.
Yeah,
I really love that they
pops.
leaned. I know. I mean, I think of Lorcana as like blacks and purples, and the red is
it's got
nice.
it's got the scarabs and stuff. So let's see.
I'm excited about the glittery dice.
Yeah, I know you love those. Yeah.
I know I love these little dice. Keep them in my thing for damage counters. But these ones are fun because they're glittery. Who doesn't love? I'm a little dice goblin.
I know you are. Yeah, they've got the.
Who they match my playmat?
The dividers. I like this one with Fred on it.
Yeah, they got some new characters in there. What is the? Each one comes with the wheel of. The Wheel of Jafar is what I was like.
The Wheel of Jafar?
The Wheel of Jafar. The Jafar Wheel.
Jafar Wheel.
Ooh, they've got, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Set this aside.
Pull me something good.
We'll just do this for sorting.
Oh, nice.
That's right. See, I just thought that out. All right. Let's open them up. You want to open them up?
Nope, it's all you. This is your winnings.
I am a generous winner. I would offer
you are.
to share.
It's very kind of you. But
let's see. Get anything good here?
That genie got a lot of play in the sealed.
Yeah, I mean, giving evasive, like everybody was like, I want to play evasives or things that can attack evasives.
There was a lot of evasives.
Ooh!
Starting strong with a legendary in the first pack. Well, this is our first one, isn't it?
The Lilo causing an uproar. Yeah, so like I actually, and a shiny Alice, clumsy as can be.
Ooh.
So this is interesting because like we have not.
We haven't pulled out. That's our first Lilo at all.
Yeah, we've not pulled this one yet. Like, and you know, I mean, we didn't have any decks that we were like, we need this for. So, but that's very exciting that we actually finally got one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Normally Ian likes to throw those at the cat.
Yeah, he likes
to chase them.
Chasing them, yeah. The Mushu, Monterey Jack.
Mushu.
See, I feel like here's what we're going to do. We'll put this up here.
There you go.
That's right, we got that. Jeweled Collar, I know it's one of your favorites from the sealed event.
That won me some games in the sealed event.
Gemini Cricket and Tiana. And Shiny Pull the Lever.
Pull the lever.
If you go to your local leagues, you'll be able to get a a shiny promo version of this.
Yeah.
So,
Distributor, better than hander outer.
All right, you got Mad Dog, Gene, Go-Go. I like this Go-Go. I'm hoping that maybe next set's a little bit of a lower power. Environment, we might be able to see that Go-Go with the new Shift Go-Go be pretty good.
Yeah, that's one of the decks I was talking to you about that I think would be a fun, a Shift Floodborn.
Pulled a Rhino.
A Rhino.
This guy was pretty scary.
I told Brian we had a trove to open tonight, and if we pulled any extra Rhinos for him.
There we go. Oh, and a shiny Palace card.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool card because that one is actually, I think, might be semi-relevant. We saw Zach Bivens play
Zach was
this one.
running it, so.
Yeah, so. Opening troves is just kind of a different experience than opening a box.
It is.
I can't describe what makes it different. I mean, I can just literally describe what makes it different. The pieces, but it just feels more...
They're treasure troves. I hope that they have more treasure in them. And I'm sure scientifically or mathematically or whatever that it's the same. They're all packs. But in my mind,
but
it's
for a while
trove.
there, we only were pulling enchanteds from
That's true. From troves. We didn't see them out of our boxes.
Luck thing. Vinny and the Sultan. Where's Vinny? And shiny baby Rhino.
Baby Rhino. That might be our final Rhino.
Oh, of the
because
super
one
rare?
Comes in the Palace Heist of the super rare Rhinos. So I know that it's a popular card.
Yeah, very strong right now.
Yeah.
I would expect a lot of Amber Steel in the metagame. So. Oh, we got the Light the Fuse. Oh, we got this Lady Decisive Dog.
Nice.
This is actually one of the decks that I think is going to be really good post-rotation as well, and specifically on Yzma on the Edge. That's a fun one. Specifically, I think this is going to be a good one to like help new players get started. Just because you can build like a budgetized version of it pretty easily.
Right.
Yzma on the Edge and Khan Warhorse.
Nice.
All right, 3 more.
All right, 3 more to go. Anything going to be as good as your first pack? We'll have to see.
I don't know. We got Dale. Jaguar. Nero. Alice. Another Con. Lena Saberwing. Man, they have a cool looking character.
Yeah.
I didn't watch DuckTales, but...
I feel like I need to go back and watch DuckTales.
But
it's got my favorite voice actor, and by that I mean my favorite actor. Mr. David Tennant.
Yes.
Who voices Scrooge McDuck.
I
actually think the voice actor...
We pulled... this is a nice one.
A fancy lady.
Yeah, so this one's actually kind of valuable right now.
2 packs back to back with fancy ladies.
Yeah. Oh, we got a legendary. Namari, let's go.
Namari, that's another first.
That's the other one we haven't pulled yet.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a good pack. What a good drove.
pack.
Look at this Namari though, gang. Look at this. And we got to see Ed playing this card to pretty nice effect. You can kind of like in the mid to late game, you can pretty much just like one-shot locations with it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we've got Tipo, Mirabelle, Anna, Poe, Brutus, Hamster Ball. I don't even know what that is. Gives resist. Oh, okay. Arthur.
That's why Rhino has resist.
Oh, the Hamster Ball. That makes sense, actually. Yeah. Huey, that's just kind of a cool card.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that card.
Nothing we won't do. Anna. And a shiny Atataya.
Shiny Atataya. Overstated meat stick.
Overstated meat sticks.
You got a shiny overstated meat stick.
That one is not going to ever go away.
Ooh, Anna, that's exciting. I've been fiddling with that in Blurp Ball.
Yeah, so. That's a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
I feel like as well...
Especially because I often have an Elsa out. So her second effect of getting to draw when she quests. So not only does she quest to give you support, but she sometimes it draws you a card.
Yeah, and I've been making some like budget-friendly post-rotation decks that I've been kind of making some content off of. And the Blurple post-rotation deck's actually like pretty cool. I think that depending on what gets reprinted, this Anna and some of the other cards, the 7-drop Elsa, that they're really they've been pushing that card and all these different alt arts, and it's going to be one of the promo.
Yes.
So
for the DLCs. Beautiful artwork.
Yeah, so it seems like that might actually just be something that sees a lot of play. We've got Vincenzo Santorini, the explosive expert. We got a super rare Flynn Rider breaking and entering, and a shiny Lumiere, Nimble Candelabra. All right, very good. Well, honestly, huge getting
huge
these
pulls. The two legendaries
the
is
two
awesome.
legendaries is really cool. And we also got a couple good rares like this lady.
And Rhino.
As well. Rhino,
that's a pretty good one. So, yeah, some good stuff.
Very cool. All right. All right, well, that about wraps up our episode today. Thank you all so much for joining us for this Worlds recap. Just really getting to revel in the fun of Worlds, and of course, me getting to open up, my winning treasure trove.
Some treats in there.
We'll have to do some more wagers on the podcast in the future. Yeah.
Well, I have to win some of them.
Well, surely, eventually. Well, thank you all, like I said, for joining us. Next week, we're going to be doing a coaching corner on how to test for set champs, how to prepare.
Set champs are right around the corner.
They're right around the corner. In the next couple of weeks, they'll be starting, and they'll be running through, I think, the second weekend of August.
Yep.
Check your local area. Get signed up. Check your local listings. We're also going to do a welcome wagon on Lorcana etiquette.
Yeah.
For the newer players or players that are transferring over to this game from other games. There are some things that are different in Lorcana, and we're going to kind of show you the things that you should and shouldn't do if you're sitting down at a Lorcana competitive event or even just local leagues.
Yeah.
So we'll be going into that. As a reminder, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave us a review if you're listening on Spotify or any of the other podcast sites. Consider commenting if you have any questions. If we see any questions in the comments, we might shout them out on the next episode. Answer them if we can. And then, of course,
let us know your thoughts on best of 2 versus best of 3.
Yeah, we want to. I mean, really, seriously, like we want to hear what the community thinks, and and why they why they think one might be better than the other. And then, of course, check us out on Camp Quest if you're listening, where we do some other YouTube stuff, and you can check out Local Lore Lens, which is Lindsay's
on Instagram. So we have a lot of fun sort of sneak peeks behind the scenes, daily life of a Lorcana loving, TCG loving couple.
Yeah, and we do some occasionally like funny bits.
Oh, we're hilarious.
We're so funny.
Obviously, I'm biased.
Oh my gosh, we're so funny.
You're so embarrassing.
That's all right. All right, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.